So for those of you who don't know me, of course you already said my name, Jonathan Jenkins. I am the cyber guy here. I guess a lot of people like to say that I'm a hacker, but my skills range a lot more than that. All right, I don't go around breaking into people's bank accounts. I do break into people's cell phones very often. When I first got here, my supervisor, Victoria Corley, who just recently came out of the hospital, she went to rehab for about pneumonia. She's doing wonderful. I'm glad she's a fighter just like the rest of us. That's always nice, right? But my test from my supervisor is, "Hey John, can you break into my cell phone?" And I was like, "No, it's legal, right?" And she said to me, "Yes, but I'm giving you consent to break into my cell phone. Not a problem. Give me about a week." And later she came back to her cell phone one day to find my wonderful face and a text message letting her know that I had broken into her phone. Later she told me never to do it again. That was my test. Since then, I've been enjoying my time here at NXTS. Now then, with that in mind, I've had my wonderful old boss, Tom Barnes, here to come and listen to me talk for the first time. It's been a year and a half since I left the military. However, I'm still enjoying myself. I love what I do. All right? Now, what are we here to talk about today? Network mapping, vulnerability assessment tools, and so on and so forth, right? What's the intent in network mapping? Well, just like any good puzzle, you have to find the pieces. Now, of course, if you ever bought your own puzzle, you pick up the box, you open it up, you lay it down, you flip it over, you start putting it together, right? But how many of you have ever opened a puzzle box and messed up and lost a piece? That sucks, right? And I'll do you one better. Have you ever tried to put a puzzle together that was upside down? No images. Just go with the actual outline, so on and so forth. And then do that with thousands of pieces, all right? Not a few hundred, it's not 50, hundreds of thousands. It's what network mapping is like. And we're only talking about IP version 4 at this moment, not even talking about IP version 6, which gets you unquantifiable. All right, we don't go to that far. However, when we speak on network mapping, what is the #1 tool everybody uses all the time? Nmap. All right, this is exactly why the title was sitting there. Now, Nmap is a tool that can be used on Windows, Linux, Mac, so on and so forth, whatever flavor you like. And I'm a big Linux advocate, not because of any other reason that it's free. And every hacker in the world loves to use Linux. Why? Because I have more control of my system. I can tell my hardware where to go. I can tell my software where to go. I can build my own scripts and so on and so forth. I don't have to worry about applications that I have to pay for. And of course, no hacker wants to pay for his own crap, right? I want to steal your money, not use my own. We all follow that? And how many of you in your lifetime have you thought that I'm 100% secure sitting at home? No hands? Never feel that way? Oh, somebody's always watching me, the FBI, the NSA, but listen to my calls. That's a lot of data to go through. Well, why would you need to be a target? Because you got $5. You got $5 I don't have, all right? And I want your money. But my first step, just like everybody always asks me in my CEH classes, Security Plus, Network Plus, "Hey John, you're a hacker, what do you always have to do?" You're gonna find my target, all right? So the first thing I need to do is find your IP address. Wow, that's gonna suck for me because how many of you know the IP address of Google, for example? Nobody! Nobody can raise their hand and be like, "I know Google's IP address off the top of my head." Nobody knows that. Now then, what do you know? www.google.com. Goes DNS, determines IP address for me, and I'm good to go, right? But you do understand that you have a domain name. You have a host name. You have an ISP that handles your IP address. And even there, I'm going to find a domain name associated with the ISP so I can get to you. Once I've figured out my attack vector, or rather my entry point to you, now I need to start scanning. And what am I looking for? Well, how do computers communicate? Obviously, you have the network layer, layer 3 or IP. For you Apple people, Apple talk. However, all right, we also have to worry about the transport layer, the TCP, IP, and so on and so forth, and blah, blah, blah. When we talk about those types of things, we talk about ports. Now then, any IT specialist in here, system administrators, network professionals, anybody who's worked on cyber in your lifetime, you should know how many port numbers there are. Now, if I asked you to name the number of ports, could you do it on the top of your head? Go.
65,565.
Ooh, I heard somebody said 65,536. Is it 35 or 36?
535.
It's 535. 65,535. All right. Now then, not all those ports we use. However, we also have those well-known ports, 1 through 1023, correct? And all those have specific services. And based on how you respond to information coming to you, I'll determine what type of operating system you have. So, once I learn services, I know port numbers that are open. I know the operating system you use, and now it's time to determine how can I attack you. Now then, how many people love to use telnets? Oh, wait a minute. Every IT professional in the world should be able to tell me that Telnet, we don't use it anymore. And why don't we use Telnet anymore? It's clear text. It's not secure. Somebody can read into what I'm doing. That sucks, right? All right, nobody wants to know what's going on with you. I do, because I'm trying to exploit you. So you don't want me to know, all right? But what if you have to monitor your own network? What if you want to know what everybody else is doing? What if you want to keep people accountable? We have to work with those types of things, and that's when we get to logging. It's an entirely different topic. We're not going that far, all right? So instead of using Telnet, I would use
SSL.
SSL. Okay, we can work with that, SSL. But there's another service I was looking for. Port number 22. This is protocol.
SSH.
SSH. So FTP is 21 and 20. All right, both of those go together because 21 is control and the data goes through to 20. So if I saw, let's say FTP open, for example, I would know that you have file transfers that can be done, right? And of course, I can do some brute force and get user credentials and so on and so forth. I just watch. I can follow the game. Now, how many people have ever used Wireshark before? All right, nobody likes Wireshark. Everybody uses it. Nobody likes it. Why? Because you have to read filters. You have to go through a lot of raw data, and that disturbs people at times. However, there's plenty of information associated with it. How about this? When it comes to Skype, and everybody loves to use Skype, right? Especially service members. I'm sorry, you have your girlfriends, you have your boyfriends. You sit down. Hey, I'm doing good. I'm on the TDY. We're not going out. You got beer yet? Totally cool. And we're ready to go. However, did you know that I can watch your conversation on Skype using Wireshark? All right, it's a wonderful thing. Now then, if you did use SSL, then I can't break that encryption, so I couldn't watch the conversation. So it's a true statement. It's all about how you use it. But the point that I just made is when I determine what ports you have open, I can determine what protocols you have running. When I figure out what protocols you have running, I determine attack vectors, right? But before I get to that point, I have to do a vulnerability assessment. Now, I'm not going to the vulnerability part yet. Let's still talk about the network mapping. I can find one node in an entire network and know that I can do nothing with it. Let's say your tablet. Now, what do people use tablets for? Everything today. When you're at home and you have a desktop and a laptop, your tablet means nothing to me, truthfully. Especially if you have kids who just watch Netflix all day. Netflix, 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 Netflix. All right, Mom, we're not doing dinner right now? Cool, Netflix. We've gone through that. So why do I care about your Netflix account? I don't. However, when I am in your internal network at home, now I need to determine other types of devices. So I can scan a range, never just one host. But there's a problem with scanning ranges, right? If I scan a range, I create more traffic. If I create more traffic, that means more noise. More noise means you see if you're monitoring your network. So you always have to remember that slow and low is the best way to go. For any pen tester, for any hacker. If you slow down the way you do your scanning, because TCP packets, if I do 65,536 to different port numbers across the board, obviously that's a lot of different traffic. If I do one packet to one port every 10 minutes, does that look legitimate? Yeah, all right. No analyst is going to sit down and be like, this is somebody trying to scam you, dude. Now, granted, a good analyst will stop and be like, there's no reason why you should have just one packet from this IP address. Maybe you should have a few thousand. Nothing wrong with it as well. It's all about how you choose to move through the network. All right? You always have to remember that there are tons of security protocols that you have to face due to the fact that defense in depth has grown to a fantastic point today. Groovy? Notice I say groovy a lot. If you're feeling that I'm not a 70s baby, I promise. I'm 25 years old, 1988. So I say groovy a lot. If somebody's counting, I'm good with that. I'm trying to get to 100 before I get done. So, now,
Like it, you're my age.
no, wait a minute.
She's 25.
I'm older than you.
You're
You're 25 and 2 months older. Remember September, baby. All right. So, truth be told, though, why do I bring up Nmap?
That's nice.
Whoa, I said truth be told. No, I wasn't thinking Hershey. Nevertheless, before you even get to talk about vulnerability assessment, we always have to talk about network mapping tools. Because Nmap is built into many of these tools, or functions of it. HPing 2 and 3, also tools that are used inside of network mapping. Why? Well, I can craft my own TCP packets. If I craft my own TCP packets and I know how your systems are going to respond, or believe I know, I can start to make analysis about ports that are responding back to me. For example, in a TCP connection, how many people could tell me the three-way handshake? It's not hard. You got first what? Sin. What's next? Synad. Alright, and the last one, add. I do a synchronization. Somebody on the other side, or the server, is going to acknowledge my synchronization and send one back to me. And of course, I have to acknowledge theirs. Once we've done that, we're ready to talk. What happens when I don't acknowledge your send back to me? Well, that would be considered a stealth scan. It's very effective against Windows systems. Actually, the only scanning technique that works against Windows systems. Granted, that's if you use it in its basic functions. When you get into scripting and doing some other things, entirely different story. We've been talking advanced level one other day. Right now, keep it low level, simple for all of you to understand, right? Now then, for you Mac users, you're not protected. All right, I can still come and find you. I can still start to do some scans on you. Why? Well, how many people know that Mac was built off of BSD? Basically makes Mac a Linux system in a sense. Oh wait, I'm sorry, Unix. All right. I was waiting for somebody to be like, John, you're wrong. Nobody did it. So I saw a hit and I was like, no, you messed that up. All right, I'll go with that. It is a Unix system, truthfully. And that means it will respond to other Unix types of commands. So an Xmas scan, which takes the flags of TCP such as fin, urge, and push, instead of on T. You respond back and say, whoa, there's a problem. And I know that that port is open. It's the best way to scan a Mac system, still to this day, Xmas scan. Everybody catch that? Now, it's not like, I don't know, why do you want to, does anybody know why the Xmas scan is called the Xmas scan? The flags, numbers, binary. So the Xmas scan flags come in as a 0101001. 0. Alright, it's supposed to look like Christmas lights. If you're not a geek like everybody else in here, then sorry. If you are, totally cool, you get the joke. Alright, so we'll move on. Now, why do I bring up those type of scans? Well, if Nmap has the scans built into it, then if I know those things are true and I craft them my own way inside of HTTP2 and 3, I get the same result. So they're both used in this fashion. Perfect. Now then, moving to vulnerability assessment. What's the point of vulnerability assessment? What's the point? What do you think, Thomas?
Find out where you're at risk.
Where you're at risk. Totally cool. So we have common vulnerabilities that are exploited. Period. For example, in a Windows environment, you have NetBIOS, right? Does anybody know the port number range for NetBIOS? Nobody has CEH in here? 135 through
143.
Oh, too high.
139.
139. Alright? There's your port numbers associated with NetBIOS. If you're running NetBIOS, you already know that we have exploits associated with that. But do we accept it? Now, if you're using it inside of your corporate environment and it's only being passed locally, if on your border you're protected, then you worry about it. Some people accept it, some people don't. The point is to understand your network. So when I do a vulnerability test with, let's say, the #1 tool out there, Nessus, and determine all those types of things, when I see that file, it'll come up as a warning. Do I accept it as a risk or not? You have to determine those types of things. Now, getting straight into the vulnerability tools, I said Nessus is the #1 tool when it comes to vulnerability assessment. Of course, you have your opinions. We all have our opinions. But, unfortunately enough for you, the world and much of the majority agree with me that Nessus is. And the DoD is switching to Nessus, by the way. For those of you who like Saint and Retina, nothing wrong with that, alright? They all cost you though. Now, Nessus does have a free version to the States. However, does anybody know the trick about the free version? You can't use it in Enterprise. Why? Because it's always 15 days behind the paid version. So you want to be open to some type of vulnerability for 15 days before it gets locked up due to the fact that Nessus finally will let you know. No, we're not going to accept that. I want to know once it comes to problem. Now then, does anybody know how much 1 year subscription to Nessus will be? About $1,300. Do you want to pay $1,300 for 1 year subscription? About $3,000 for a 3 year? No, maybe not. So I'm a Linux Unix guy. I love doing everything as free as possible. So I use OpenVAS. Why? All right, so one question. Well, OpenVAS came out after Nessus went to its proprietary version. So that way, those of us in the world of free still have something for free. And it's community driven, so we get to share all of our results with one another. So if we see different types of scripts, if we see different types of testing abilities, and so on and so forth, we get to pass it along. That doesn't mean you have to do that, because it's open source, openly accepted in the government or in the enterprise environment. It's for the United States at the moment. No, it's not. We've been finding ways to kind of justify it, and we're slowly starting to dabble into it, but in your home networks. So you get into the environment, absolutely take a look at OpenVAS, and maybe, just maybe, you might become a believer like I did. All right? Now, all that to say, where can you get OpenVAS? We can go to their website, or it's actually built inside of the Kali suite that was created by the Office of Security. For those of you who know anything about doing some pen testing, you've done your own security audits, you've worked in the security field. All right, Kali does have the OpenVAS suite inside of it that you just have to set up. Sure. Next one on the list, Saint and Retina. I'm going to tie both of those together real quick. Now, Saint, not what you think. All right, Saint is a wonderful scanner. Yes, it was built very close to the same time that Nessus was. The problem with Saint was it didn't get a lot of federal backing like Nessus did. Now, of course, the DoD actually has subscriptions to both Retina and Saint, and it's in HTML format. I can see it right there on the page, and in the PowerPoint, it makes it very nice and colorful. So this is exactly why people like Nessus, and of course, it has a lot of scripting abilities inside of it. But at the end of the day, when you have to tell somebody who knows nothing about networks what our vulnerabilities may be, Nessus may be the way to go for it. Remember? I told you I'm going for 100. All right, no, not there yet. I'm probably around 40, I think. I've been counting, or I've been trying to count. But I talk over myself, and I can't think, and it happens that way. So. Anyway, so moving to all that. Once I figure out that I have vulnerabilities to Samba, to NetBIOS, to SSH, and it tells me that you can possibly use these type of logins. I see Telnet open on certain systems. I find all my IP ranges. I do all my stuff on the domain. I look at Active Directory and say that my top level domain has problems with group policies when it passes it. And we're not using SNMP version 3, we're using version 1, and we can still see it in clear text. All these are things that you should hear and follow when you look at your vulnerability assessment tools. However, do you ever use just one vulnerability assessment tool? I'm going to tell you, no. You should always use at least 3 so you can compare results. They're going to find false positives. They're going to find false negatives at times. So, nothing is perfect in this world. Why? Because humans are not perfect. So if that's the case, you should always, always, always have redundancy. All right, all of you IT specialists in here, redundancy, redundancy, redundancy. You've heard it all the time. If you've been in any of my classrooms, I've told you the exact same thing. Redundancy. All right? So we find all of our entry points. We state that this is a wonderful report that I'm going to give to my CISO and my bosses and my managers and so on and so forth, and state, and guess what? These are our issues. These particular systems, maybe we should take them offline and start to harden them. How many people remember that term? All right? Turn off some of these services that we're not using because we have least privilege. Turn off some of these services that we don't need. Disable some of these accounts that we're no longer using because these people are no longer here. We fired them a long time ago. Wonderful day. All right? Once we've done all of that, we're good to go. Or we can say, hey, these are just best guesses. Because that's exactly what a vulnerability assessment does. It takes services. It takes things that are known about these services and determines whether or not this is truly a risk. And it rates them. But you have to do your own analysis. So if that is the case, what do you do afterwards? You can try to exploit it yourself. Sit down at the keyboard, start bringing up some scripts, and start running them. Or you can take other tools out there that are capable of exploiting. Now, the number one tool in the world today for exploiting one-stop shop for all script kiddies is Metasploit. How many people have heard that word before? I hope so. If you haven't to this day, we got problems if you work in IT or ever heard of IT. Metasploit is the number one stop. Now, the other side of that is they did build another tool. It's this guy right up here. How many people want to try to say it? What is it? Nexpose. All right. I'm making sure. I love how everyone does. Now, the Nexpose is actually designed to do a vulnerability assessment for you, and then it can attempt to exploit. All right? Metasploit does not do that. Metasploit, you find your target using Nmap. Yes, it uses Nmap to find your targets. It takes support numbers and says, hey, guess what? I have these scripts within my database to launch against it. However, Metasploit is not free. It is not free. There's a free version of it, yes. The full version is about $5,000 for one subscription for 1 year. If you want to go higher than that, we talk almost to about $20,000. But I have a suite of hundreds of thousands of attacks that can break ports, services to any operating system that I find, and or devices. So, if you want to be a guy who's like, you don't know what's going on, but I know how to break into it, Metasploit your finger button right there. All right, easy button, click it, we're good to go. One from there. All right. Now going back up to Nexpose. For those of you who want to be able to do all of the above and build your test environments and show your managers that, hey, yes, we have this vulnerability inside of our system. And on top of that, I've been able to press the button and launch against it. Nexpose may be good for you. All right. Now, personally, I've used every one of these tools myself. Yes. I will tell you right now that Nmap has many different versions out there, and it is able to be used on every operating system, like I said before. For Windows, for example, for Windows examples, you have Nmap. I people like GUI and not command line. Everybody, we want to point and click, man. I don't want to do all this crazy stuff, dude. Nothing wrong with that. All right, we got away from syntax for a reason. Nmap allows you to do that. It'll tell you, hey, guess what? I'm going to use this particular script, so you can learn it if you want to. Or just say, hey, guess what? Is it going to do this? Is the scanner one? Yes. The ranger one? Yes. Cool. Press the button. Groovy. Nobody has to know what is happening. It's computer magic. We all like talking about that, right? Now then, what is our mail ports that we use? We have three major ones. I'm not talking about the encrypted ones. The standard mail ports. I got one guy who's emailing here. Report number for mail. I got 25. 110. What's IMAPs? Oh, everybody gets stuck on this. IMAP, nobody? 149? 3. 143, fantastic. So you have IMAP. Now, 110, what service name was that? Pop, what? Pop 3, you're fantastic. And then, of course, 25 is? SMTP. I was making sure that nobody would say SNMP because I laugh when people do that. All right, but it's easy to get messed up. Fair enough. Now, all that to be stated, can I exploit you through your email? Yes! All right, now people stop and be like, well, I mean, it's usually just a bad link or a Trojan. You can just click the button if somebody touches the link. That's not the only way. Metasploit, if I find these ports open, and I determine it's actually a web server, for example, along with the MX service, then there with all my emails, yes! I can throw all kinds of attacks against you. What's the number one vulnerability, the major services out there for vulnerabilities? All right, we have HTTP, HTTPS, SMTP, POP, IMAP. What do you think the number one service that gets exploited daily is?
SMTP.
I heard SMTP, I heard POP.
What's that? SMTP.
What?
HTTP.
HTTP, you feel like the web? Okay. But say right now it's the web. All right. HTTP, HTTPS, no matter how you look at it, going through the web is the number one way to attack you. Because why? We always are on there now. All right. If it's clicking on a bad link, being redirected because there's some terrible DNS poisoning on you, or somebody's done DNS cache poisoning on you, if I redirect you using cross-site scripting, or rather, cross-site request forgery, so on and so forth. If I do a drive-by download to you, it doesn't matter what my attack method is. Because you're susceptible to it, you fall into it. And how do we determine those things at all times? Vulnerability assessment tools. Because it can tell you that these are the services that you have running, including, hey, you got Java coming off of here too, and what version of it you have. That's always nice to know. Because let's say you're behind 3 or 4 versions. Well, you've missed a lot of batches here. All right, these are the types of things that you should always be paying attention to. All right. So, what do you need to do as a system administrator in any level? When I say that these are all of my issues, I've got thousands of them, sir. What's the next step? Fixing them. What do you do to fix them, though? Do we have the skills and the knowledge to fix the issues that we have today in our computer realm? Do we want to fix them? Because they will destroy the things that we love so much. How about RTSP, for example? Does anybody know what RTSP is? Real-time streaming protocol. Can you think of anything that we actually use that for all the time? How about you Pandora users? How about you YouTube users? We stream data all the time today, and there are tons of exploits associated with streaming data now. So if that's the case, what are you going to do about it? Well, you got 2 choices. You can learn about RTSP and figure out how to truly secure it. You can also say screw it and say we do it in the internal network. And anybody going out goes through a particular tunnel directly to their website. I believe in IPsec. I believe in IP version 6. I don't have to worry about it until I get exploited. Proactive, being proactive, is one of the hardest things that humans have a problem with. And why is that? It's easier to do this. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Simple enough, right? If it's not broke, don't fix it. I can get out to Facebook. Yes, you can. I can play Candy Crush. Yes, you can. All right? Have I lost my credit card information yet? Now you have it. Well, then why do we need to secure it? Well, sir, do you want to lose your... That's not the point. I can still play Candy Crush and don't touch it. Yes, sir. Walk away. But 2 weeks later, when he finds out that Candy Crush on Facebook actually does track your location. It checks the contacts on your list. It checks the things that you've been posting. It goes to the cell phone app that you have there as well and starts pulling out pictures. It can look at your videos and then advertise to you and then sell that information out. Oh my goodness, what about privacy laws? What about PII? No. You wanted to do it. You said you accepted it. So I can't do anything for you, sir. It's a bad day. So the point is to truly understand what happens in our systems. How many people can name the flags for TCP in general?
The flag?
The flags. So I got sentence and act. We already got those two. They're the flags. Urge, push,
There's a reset too, I think.
fin, or push, and reset. Yep, those are your major flags. What do they do? I got push and urge. Those are the two major ones that everybody messes up on. Push and urge. Push. I'm going to send something out immediately. Urgent. I'm going to receive it and look at it immediately, or as fast as possible, right? However, when do we ever use those? You know. No! But, could I tell you, we do TCP strings all the time. How about UDP? Who could tell me the #1 mantra in UDP?
Fire and forget.
Fire and forget, I like that. How about this? I would tell you a joke about UDP, but I'm not sure if you get it. He got it. Right. Rest of y'all are like, it happens. So in the case of TCP and UDP, TCP being connection oriented, UDP being connection less. With TCP, I always acknowledge that I've received something from you. Always make sure that I receive every packet associated with our conversation. And if I don't, I'm going to tell you that I need X, Y, and Z in this order so that way we can continue to talk. In UDP, I keep going. Netflix, for example, is built off of UDP. So why do I care about what you're watching unless I'm going to steal that instead of paying the $8 a month to watch Netflix? Yes, I've done it before, guys. I don't want anybody to say anything about it. You can't prove it. Can't prove it. So it's online, but you still can't prove it. So all that to be stated, moving down the wire and getting straight to exploit. You have two ways to do it. Typically, you can take everything that you learned about a system, application, so on and so forth, blah, 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 and throw it in a test environment. And then once you've done that, you can launch your attacks. And say, hey, guess what? These ones work, these ones didn't. Or you can do it on a live system. But if you do it on a live system, what happens? What happens if it actually works? You break stuff, man. All right, we've got lost productivity. Because the denial of service is a horrible thing, correct? Now then, how many of you think denial of services happen all the time? Feel it? What do you think? Botnets? It's a good way to go, right? He's got the look on him. So when it comes down to denial of services, actually, denial of services is one of the least likely types of attacks you can receive. But why? You know how hard it is to do a denial of service nowadays? Over the network? How many people are blocking ICMP right now? You should be. Alright. If you're not blocking your enterprise, we got a lot of problems. We need to talk. Alright, but in the case of being at home, do you ping other people in your household very often? I know I got a lot of IT people in here, but do you send out pings in your own local network? Yeah, no, maybe so. The truth, do you have to do that to figure out if you have network connectivity? No! Alright, there are many other ways to talk out on the network to make sure that I can use my NIC card to go to my access point. Alright? Because that's one of the uses for ping. How about trace route? True statement. Alright, I want to know how many houses, what does that actually tell you? Well, it tells me routes. Yes. True statement. However, is ICMP a necessity? No. It is not considered a necessity in any network. But leaving it open allows me to do ICMP tunnel. I can do the ping of death. And how many people actually know what a ping of death is? What is the ping of death? Go.
It's an oversized ping.
It is an oversized ping. I love it. I hate when people tell me, oh, it's just a lot of ICMP packets coming to you. That's not true. That is not true. Because that would be a ping suite. However, Or even if it's just going to one physical IP address, it's ping flood. But there's really not a point to that because it's very small and you have to deal with a lot of systems like a botnet. So that's not an effective way to go, especially if you're going over the internet. Because over the internet, how often do we allow pings to just travel along and blah, 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 etc. There are a lot of places that will stop pings. Right? So you need to understand your networks. You need to understand your systems. You need to understand your environment before you ever talk about using the systems. Because if you don't think security at every moment, you're falling behind. This is the point. So at the end of the day, when you start going through all these security things, when you start doing vulnerability assessments, the next step after you find all the information, and before you even start to attack, is did we consider defense in depth? Where did you do your scans from? Did you do your scan from the internal network right next to the computer? I'm of course going to see different port numbers sitting open. Did I do it externally? Of course I'm going to run into firewall issues and such. These are important things because I should be able to see exactly what a hacker would have to go through to get to me and not just do it locally. So will you do an external vulnerability test the next time you run one of these tools? I hope so. Will you run it past an IDS? Will you run it past an IPS to see if they detect them? I hope so. To see what your true vulnerabilities are, to see what your risks truly are. And if you don't go through the steps, you're hurting yourself. They truly don't tell you anything if you don't go through the method that somebody like me would have to go through to hurt you. Ruby. I know I haven't made it to 100 yet, fair enough. Anyway, at this point, do we have any questions? Like I said before, I'm a major Linux, and I don't know if I actually talked about my experience at all. So with that in mind, I know some of you are in here, seen or heard my credentials, A+, Net+, Security+, CEH, CHFI, LPT. So I have the entire freaking slew of information from these accounts. Red Hat certs, so I have the system administrator, the network engineer, and was it system architect. Then of course I have LPIC, level 1, level 2, I have Linux Plus, CC Administrator, Novell Administrator, see the trend here. So when it comes to Mac systems, I don't use them at all because you have no control of your system. I can get into the command line, I can change the access to it, then get to legal issues, I don't like doing that, right? And of course Windows, why do we all use Windows? It's cheap. Whoa! You just said that to a Linux user. What's up with that, man?
I was joking.
Oh, okay.
It's expensive in every way you can
gooey.
think of. Paying
It's
for it,
gooey?
the headaches afterwards. It's,
Linux is gooey. What's up with that? Okay, so it is expensive, but Mac is more expensive than Windows is.
it is.
More widely accepted. And more widely accepted is true. Windows, you use it because you use the network. So you go home and it's comfortable and it's easy to use, right? Mac, it's easy to use, but it's a learning curve different from Windows. If you use Windows all your life, why would you go to Mac? Well, why would you ever use a Linux system? Why did hacktivists choose Linux systems? I already said power, that's a true statement. I already said money, that's a true statement. What else?
Open source.
Open source! Open source. I get to share everything we've talked about with other people. So I go through the painstakings of breaking into a Windows system, through all of these different things in defense and depth for 6 months. I can stop and say, hey, guess what, guys? I finally did it! Rock on! This is my method. This is how I did it. Make it your own if you can. We share these things. Every hacker in the world, every pen tester in the world shares these things. So we're sharing, should you be sharing, as security professionals, to keep us out? I hope so.
Absolutely.
I hope so. But then do you share it? Because if it takes $5,000 to use Metasploit, if it takes almost $2,000 to get one of these particular subscriptions, then are you really sharing? Or are you being greedy? This is my own rant. I'm a very opinionated person. I do believe that a lot of these tools should be free. They do have free versions. But free versions then are going to still cost you because you can take on risks. And you can't accept those risks in the enterprise world. So it needs to come a point where we start to come together with what we do in security. And the point of this entire conversation is for you to understand and take the time out to look at these tools, to put them together, to test them yourself, and to see what you're missing out on. If you've never done a vulnerability assessment, if you've never looked at the services running on your own system at home, do it tonight. if you can. All right, I know you got kids, you got family, you got dinner. Cool. You'll at some point determine what your own vulnerabilities and holes are, and then try to fix them. The vulnerability research databases out there to this date are wonderful. US CERT houses in a full database of vulnerabilities. So when you find them with these tools, you can go out and research them and what they do. All right, NIST.gov as well. They also have a great way to fall asleep at night, by the way. But at the same time, you will still find tons and tons and tons of not only vulnerabilities, but fixes to each one of those bugs. If they exist, go.
This one in the left side, red and sand, you can get it for free too.
They have free trials, usually around 15 to 30 days, and after that, they're going to want you to subscribe. And there will only be functions of it that is actually free, and it won't build reports for you typically. So, little things that you have to go through. Now, if you get their older versions, like if you're one version behind, you can get the full version for free, yes, but you won't have support from the system typically. Yep.
I was just wondering if I could take you on a slight tangent.
Yeah!
Since you're the resident expert in here, what do you think about this hard bleed bug?
Okay, so what do I think of it? Like
I'm not sure like how it's been around for so long and we're just figuring it out.
Oh, well, now, first off, a lot of legacy attacks still work to this date. All right, have you ever heard of the death bug, for example, it runs off of port 2 on Windows systems? It started back in NT, and it still affects Windows, up to Windows 7 Service Package 1. Yeah, it's a fantastic thing. But then, of course, everything we have in terms of signatures will detect it and stop it. So the problem with the bleed bug in itself is that we didn't have a signature to actually find it and stop it. Once you get signatures, you get. And it's because we're always waiting on everybody else to find something to protect ourselves, right? All right. Now, other than that, I mean, to say that it's affected us, it's affected you.
I haven't heard any reports of actual people being, exploited for it. Like, but I guess people aren't going to really advertise it. It has happened already.
Yes.
They're saying it can happen, but nobody's come out and said, yeah.
Probably has happened. I'll say that. Like when it comes to statistics, what is it? Only 10% maybe of small companies actually do report, and larger companies even less than that, because of not only the cost, but you're also tarnishing your name. You lose customer trust and so on and so forth, and that's not acceptable. But I mean, it's kind of the nature of the beast.
Before this has actually came out, have you heard of any of it being exploited at all, or?
I have not directly. So I can tell you. I don't know.
I was just curious because what I've heard of it, I've only actually came aware of it today or yesterday, and they were saying they don't know of any people exploiting it, but they don't also believe it hasn't been exploited.
If a bug has been used,
Yeah.
if it's been used, the question is, has it been detected? So, I mean, I've honestly never seen it myself, nor have I read any forums about somebody using it and so on and so forth. In the groups of people out there that I know, however, is it possible? Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you just said, I haven't read any reports either in the state that I've seen actually somebody get exploited by it. So, good. Any additional questions? Yes, no, maybe so?
Alright guys, the next tool that we're going to talk about is Nmap. Now, as I discussed earlier during the presentation, the Nmap is one of the #1 tools when it comes to network scanning and enumerating networks when you're sitting on systems. A lot of vulnerability assessment tools utilize scripts that are associated with Nmap, so in its basic function, maybe you should know something about it. Now, I have installed Nmap on this machine, but because it does have higher functions, I do have to use the sudo command, or I can just su as root real quick for you. So now I'm root, and I shouldn't have to worry about typing in sudo every time that I run the nmap command. So with that in mind, we have nmap. Now, if you just do an nmap scan to an IP address, and let's find out what our default gateway is real quick. It takes a moment for route to compile all the information. And we are running off of wireless LAN, and our gateway is 10.0.0.1. So if I ping the 10.0.0.1, let's make sure that we're reaching it properly. Yay, Control-C that. And then afterwards, we can do our nmap scan with the standard 10.0.1. Now, Nmap by itself, if I don't use the verbose command, won't resolve anything until it is done scanning a target. That doesn't mean every target, that means a target. So every time it finds something, it'll let you know. Yay! And we now know that our default gateway is running at ports 23, 53, 80, and other ports that are open as well. Obviously 23 is telnet, along with 53 being domain or DNS. Port 80 probably has a web interface. So with that in mind, it just uses its default, hey, I'm going to connect to each one of these ports and attempt to determine what type of service is there. If it's closed, then it doesn't show up here. If it's open, it'll let me know what those ports are. But we have many other different types of scans. So if I did an Nmap-SS, which is considered a stealth scan, this particular scan is designed to work against Windows systems typically, because Windows does not respond to any other type of scan except a full connected scan in relation to the three-way handshake. And the stealth scan, it's still in relation to the three-way handshake, but it sends the flags of SYN and SYNAC, and then instead of sending an acknowledgement to their SYNAC, we just do a reset and kill the connection. They call it a stealth scan because your connection doesn't pop up on logs due to the fact that it doesn't come up on a netstat. No connection was actually established. So if I do that same scan to the IP address of 10.0.0.1, and we're waiting to take a look at the results. They come up. Alright guys, so you'll also notice that the same results came up when I did the SS scan, which is looking at the operand there. That stands for stealth scan, yay! Alright, so we look at another type of scan within Nmap, which would be your SX, which is considered your Xmas scan. Now it's in relation to the flags, so your fin, urge, and push flags are set to this TCP packet. Now again, I'm going to do it to that 10.0.0.1. Now we're going to resolve different results, or at least we should, due to the fact that it is not the same operating systems. Operating systems, like I said, it's the same operating system, it's not a different operating system, because every operating system resolves and communicates back in different fashions. So you'll notice that I get this filtered response on each one of them, not just open, but filtered. So there must be a firewall somewhere, maybe locally or either on the network, that saw the packets and possibly attempted to think, hey, we're going to see about stopping them. It didn't stop them though, luckily for us. However, it is possible that it could have at one point in time. The null scan, which is annotated by the N, doesn't set any flags. Alright, now let me go back while this is running and say that the -SX scan is the Xmas scan, and it is designed to work against FreeBSD. For those of you who do not know, the Mac OS was built off of the BSD kernel, so the Mac OS is the most expected to respond to this particular type of scan. Many other Linux systems will as well, however the Mac OS is typically the one that will respond to this and give you back reliable results. You also see that this system, alright, this Netgear is just responding to anything I throw at it. Now typically, if you're running on a local area network, it won't necessarily do that. However, in our case, I am running on the wireless while scanning, so with that in mind, it's simply just accepting the packets and then going through. So it does have an internal firewall of its own, but it can't do anything else. So after we've taken a look at those three major types of scans, there are many others like the fin scan and the hack scan, which are annotated by the first letter of the name. So those are easy enough to do. But if you wanted to check for an operating system type, you always have to do a -O. The -O stands for operating system, and it lets me know, or at least it hopefully, based on the information that is resolved, we can try to determine what OS is running on that particular device. So as we wait for this, if I ran it against Windows, it is very possible that Windows will let us know, hey, this is possibly Windows XP, possibly Windows 7, possibly Windows 8, based on services, ports, and other things that are running that have communicated back to us in the way they communicated. You'll notice that this device did tell us, hey, this is a general purpose device running a Linux operating system, and it definitely tells us it's a ARM device. Now, Netgear apparently likes to use Linux operating systems on their routers. Totally cool. But in our company, I'm not going to go any deeper than that. You'll also notice that it still resolved open ports for us. It still does random the scans to different port numbers within a range. Now then, if I want to scan more than just one IP address, I can do this 10.0.0.1 through, and I can just add the 255, for example, and let it launch. This will scan all IP addresses that respond to us throwing something at them. So we're going to give this a moment to run and wait for the results. I'm going to skip ahead for you guys so that way you're not waiting forever though. Alright guys, after fast forwarding, we found that the current wireless that I'm sitting on has only myself actually attached to it. So the scan results were just taking a long time, thus I gave up on it. However, the point that I was making was that yes, it does scan a range of IP addresses. So with that in mind, if you did do an Nmap scan and you had done Nmap, the exact same scan before, so let me just do the history, and instead wrote it to a file, let's say the nmap.txt, for example. Alright, this is one function of Nmap. However, this is using it directly through the syntax in the operating system kernel or bash shell that you see in front of you. However, the other thing you can do is if you man Nmap and take a look at so like all tools within inside of the Linux Unix environment, you have the man page reference guide for Nmap. Now inside of here obviously it shows your synopsis on how to use Nmap. So you do Nmap, whatever scan type you're going to use, and then of course the options, and then your target specifications. When we go down, you're going to see different option summaries in here, like your target specifications, how you can do host discovery. So SL is the list scan when you specify your different targets. So 10.0.0.1 2, 4, 17, so on and so forth, instead of doing a range like I did before. You can do ping scans, you can do all kinds of the other types of scans that we talked about, like the SYN scan, the ACK scan. You have the no scan in here, the XMIS scan, which are all designed to do different things. If you have the zombie idle scan, which I did not speak on, but that is more of an advanced scanning function. You have the port ranges that you can do if you really wanted to, service types, and then you can add scripts inside of it as well. We did the OS detection using the -O, so there are a lot of things inside of here. However, I'm going to show you that instead of doing Nmap, let's say I did it to the SX, to the 10.0.0.1, and I write it to the file called nmap.xmas. It'll take the entire output of the scan and place it into the file called nmap.xmas. So we can give that a moment to go ahead and go through, and then I'm going to print it to the screen. Alright, it just finished. So I can do a cat of nmap.xmas, and I'll see the results of my file. But Nmap has functions inside of it that allows it to write to specific formats. So if you like text formats, fair enough. If you like XML formats, fair enough. And if you like a goofy type text format, then fair enough. So we'll take the Nmap scan, we'll do a -OS, and then we will add in the scan. Oh, sorry, we have to do the scan type first. So our scan type will be the SS with an OS. We'll also add in OS detection in there, and then that 10.0.0.1. Now I need to give it a file name real quick, and we'll call it nmap.script. It does my Nmap scan for me, so still you see that it actually will give you the header of our Nmap scan. Now, we've been scanning the 10.0.0.1 quite often. Almost every one of them take about 10 minutes. I said 10 minutes, 10 seconds. This one prints to the screen, as you can see. But let's take a look with an ls and see if the file was created. And you'll see that Nmap script was created. So let's go ahead and cat the Nmap script. In catting it, you're going to see that it replaces characters and does a script kiddie format. So that way if somebody's doing grepping, they won't be able to determine directly what's going on. And it's just kind of cool for some people. If that's what you like, fair enough. It's something that you would definitely do by yourself. You won't usually do that inside of a company. So taking our Nmap scan again, and we're going to do the exact same command as before, but instead of the -s, we'll do it with the -n, and we'll write it to script as well. So it should overwrite our previous file name to the N option, which is going to stand for normal. Alright, so the lowercase o is going to be for output. With the N it says normal. So if we cat that same file again, which is that nmap.script, we should get the normal output. Let me clear that so you guys can see it again. You get a normal output. And then last but not least, we're going to go back up and we'll deal with a OX, which is going to stand for our XML format. If you like XML formats, maybe your company is using XML formats, then it will still give us an XML formatting once we get done with this. So, only it will do it to the output. What you see on your screen is different from what it actually is writing to the file. Catting it, you get this wonderful XML formatting. Some of you don't like XML formatting, some of you do. Groovy? So that takes care of our Nmap basic, guys. Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jonathan. I want you guys to take a look at OpenVast. As I discussed during our presentation, I want you guys to see OpenVast as one of the few open source tools out there for vulnerability assessments. Unfortunately enough, like other tools such as Saint, Retina, and Nessus, you have to pay for those to have the full capabilities of the tools or to have all your updates. OpenVast, however, is a community in which a lot of practitioners get together and like to share our network vulnerability tests and CVEs, or common vulnerabilities and exposures. So this is the default screen that you're currently looking at. It is piggybacking off of the Greenbone security assistant, and of course we do our vulnerability tests with the underlining server, which is the OpenVast. So on the default screen here, you'll notice that I'm capable of just doing a quick immediate scan of the default settings for OpenVast to any IP address or host within my network. It is not recommended that you attempt to do a vulnerability assessment on somebody else's IP address, but technically you could. So if I were to go ahead and set in here the actual IP address of my loopback and then start my scan, you will also notice once it gets done that I get a task list for when it starts, the status, and the actual progression of the tool. Going further into that, we can look at the task list. When you go to the task list, it brings you to your default page. Yay! Anyway, moving on. So we go directly into the NVTs, which is your network vulnerability tests, and they have a multitude of tests inside of here. Essentially what these tests are designed for is to do what they say to do. Go for Adobe Flash Player and multiple vulnerabilities associated with it. It says Linux system though. And if you click on your NVT, you'll be able to read the details about not only a small brief summary of it, but of course what type of operating systems would affect, the scoring for the vulnerability itself, impact, and then the solution. Alright, what you should do if you find that the vulnerability test has been successful. Alright, you'll basically end up updating your Adobe Flash Player. But I know a lot of you will stop and say, hey, well, does this actually work on Windows systems? Actually, it does. I'm going to add in here to the filter Windows, so that way I can get more of the Windows oriented NVTs. And after it loads them through the database, you'll notice that by default, after I've done all of my updates to the system, I have about 1,730 different system tests that go directly towards the keyword Windows. And you'll see everything in here from Windows 7, XP, generalized Windows documentation, so on and so forth. So taking the time to actually review some of these, we can go to CMonkey. Multiple vulnerabilities. I have no idea what CMonkey is. However, if I were to click on it and take a look at exactly what the vulnerability test would do, I can read the inside about it, or I can just reference the actual common vulnerability and or exposure. I have multitudes of them here, but of course I can go directly to that CVE and start to read about the vulnerability. The browser engine that this usually attacks is the Mozilla Firefox before 28.0, and of course it has other associations here with Firefox to itself. It has many different references that I can go through and read about. From Bugzilla, I can go to Ubuntu if I want to. Debian has information on top of it. Red Hat does as well, and SUSE. So it's a very large collage of looking at the vulnerability itself. And since it's a common one, it always usually, if there is a fix, it will tell you what the fix is. And we always go through and share that type of information. Continuing on, back to our task list. You will notice that mine has come to 96% completion. Alright, so that's total here as a 0. We don't know exactly what's going on with it, but if we do click into the scan, we can see what type of results it has. There is one high threat that is figured out, 4 mediums, 2 lows, and 42 that are logged, and I may want to take a look at some point in time. So if we click on the details, we'll actually get a chance to see the full report, all filter results, or so on and so forth. I love looking at full reports because I'm just that type of person. We can see it in different formats, from PDF. I can just download a full PDF that I want to send via email, for example, or I can do an HTML format. I'm going to do HTML format. We do the download, and I can just open directly into the browser, and I get my wonderful report. It tells me the IP address of it, brief summary of the information associated with it. It says false positives. If the system believes it's run into a false positive, it'll let you know that. If it's not sure, there's no way to tell, obviously you just have to take it with your own analysis. And this is why I tell people it's always a good idea to cross-reference your information with Nessus and or Saint and or Retina and or any other vulnerability assessment tool, so that way you can determine your own analysis if you do have a vulnerability associated with your system. Now it immediately does a port summary, so it lets you know which of your port numbers are currently open and running. You'll notice that I'm actually scanning the local machine, so that's why you also see the port number associated with OpenVAS, which is this 9390. And of course there are other port numbers associated with that as well, but I'll get to it later. Now we go directly for the first high risk vulnerabilities. Always OpenVAS tells you your highest risk first and then goes down the ladder. Now you'll notice that this NBT tells us that OpenVAS Manager Authentication Bypass. It is possible for somebody to authenticate, or there is a possibility of somebody authenticating to my OpenVAS system, possibly through brute force. Maybe they can use the burp suite attack, possibly, or any other types of things that allow for them to attempt to authenticate to my system, which is definitely true. Now on top of which, they do have to not only know that I'm sitting here, but also know my username and or password, but it is still possible for them to authenticate. So that is a true vulnerability. And what can I do about it? A lot of things I can do about it. Sorry about that. My boss decided she'd come in. I'm sure I'm going to edit this out. Nevertheless, continuing on, we move on to our warnings. Alright, things that the system not entirely sure is necessarily considered a bad thing, but maybe we should take a look into it and do better. Alright, so we see the SSL weak cipher associated with the Apache server. So it is definitely combined these two types of warnings and said perhaps you should take a look at your encryption algorithm and determine whether or not you're running one of these weak ciphers, or maybe you're running a strong cipher. You'll notice that everything associated with an RC4 is considered a weak cipher. I understand that, and I agree with it. Why? RC4 is not a bad cipher in general. It's actually a very fast cipher. However, because it's a stream cipher, it's very easy to brute force. So those are definitely things that we should look into. Now, I'll let you guys know, I'm not using an RC4 SSL cipher. So good enough for me. I actually use AES, and I love AES, but I use it at 256 bits, and I add a couple other things into that. So we'll talk about it another time when we talk about encryption. But moving on. If you go down the listing, you'll see all the other wonderful things, but we get into our low risk. And inside of the low risk, you're going to see different things that maybe you should do to test your system. I know I'm running a Unix, or rather Linux environment, but pretty much most vulnerability assessment tools will tell you Unix. And you also notice that the domain / work group, blah, 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 because we do have, or at least it thinks that Samba is running on our side, it's something you should look into. But of course, since it's so common, it is telling you that, hey, maybe I'm wrong, it's not a big deal. The logged information is different. I do have Samba installed into this machine, and it was able to detect that, which is good. However, on top of that, I'm not using any of the Samba services at current, so that's one of those you just give and take and move on for the rest of your day. Now, you'll also notice that all the port numbers associated with the scan were not UDP. Every one of them are TCP oriented. The reason for that is because the default scan is set to TCP. And we should take a look at some of our default scanning rules. So getting right into it, your default scans and whatnot is going to be inside of this configuration spot. So if we go under targets, you're going to see what you've scanned recently, or rather what you've been scanning. And then of course we get into our scan configs. The scan configs will let you know our full and fast scan setups, and we click into it. And then you'll notice that there's different types of scans associated with everything in here, from Cisco devices to FTP scanning types, SNMP, to your scanner preferences, and so on and so forth. This is definitely a very big area you can go into, because you need to configure your scan rules to your environment. It does have a port listing associated with the scans as well. The default ports for OpenVAS are pretty much 1 through 4,481, and it scans all those port numbers. However, if I want to scan every port number associated with the system at the TCP level, I can do all TCP port scans, or I can deal with all TCP and UDP. So you have many different options with the OpenVAS environment. So aside from just using your original default scan, which is on that task list, that's just a quick immediately, hey, we start going out using our default settings, we can set up a new task. And the new task allows you to say, hey, I need to either do one of my scans from before, or I can set names, make comments, do different types of scans. That's Melanie, as a side note, please cut that. So, after looking at our scanning list and all the port numbers associated with it, you need to understand how to do your next scan. So we go into a new task, and under new task you're going to notice all your previously scanned hosts. Typically, I will tell you now that you have to first do a quick scan to an IP address or a range, and so on and so forth, so that way the system now becomes aware of it. When you go under the new task environment, that's where you're going to find your scan targets. And of course, I have my local host or the loopback address that I have been originally assigning myself. In here, you can say, hey, I want to make this scan extremely deep, NVTs, and then make comment. The quick scan didn't have enough. I believe there's more. After doing so, I can go under here and say, hey, we have the scan configurations. So if I want to do a full but very deep ultimate scan, then of course I set that rule. Now earlier we didn't look at the scan configurations very closely, but we'll take a moment. If I go here to the full and very deep ultimate, which is under the configurations, the scan configs tab, I can look and see exactly what those options will do. Or I can just say, hey, scan everything. but we want to look at the families and the MVTs associated with it. So getting directly into the details, you'll see that this particular scan configuration is capable of scanning, but also could possibly stop services and or hosts. So it is possible for this particular type of scan to deal with denial of service, and that may not always be something that you want to do. However, you could schedule this particular scan to go off during non-operational times, or if something has been pulled off the network. All those are viable options. But if you continue on, you'll see exactly what the tool will do, and it will go on forever. If you're looking at the right hand side of my screen, there's a very long list. It does Nmap scans utilizing different scripts associated with it on SQL, NFS setups. It's going to work on Windows or work to Linux and Unix. It really doesn't matter what type of system you're using. It still will give you some type of valued result. However, like we stated before, it is possible creating a denial service for you. But we go back to our new task list, and anytime you walk away from it, if you have not completed the information previously, it will delete all of it. So we go back into this and say the deep scan, and quick scan didn't resolve enough. And after doing so, we can set up for this full, very deep, ultimate scan to my local host. And if you have somebody in the room and or a coworker who usually supervises such things, you can say, hey, this person observed it, so that way you're doing the CYA thing. You want to cover yourself to avoid any type of issues to the future for your bosses. And after doing so, we create our task. It says my name was invalid because of Melody cut this part. And as you can see, the deep scan has been set up. It is sitting in my task list, and all I have to do is hit start, and it will begin the scan. So what I'm going to do is I'll allow this particular scan to go on through and finish, and we're going to take a look at the results here in a moment. Alright guys, I've fast forwarded the video itself, so we got past the long wait associated with the deep scan. So let's go ahead and take a look at the actual task results, and it does do well to let us know if it's found anything. You'll notice that the original quick scan only gave me 43 actual hits on the log portion, 1 high, 4 mediums, and 4 lows, so it resolved the exact same amount of information. Now, to be fair, this particular laptop only has the bare minimum worth of information, applications, and other types of services actually running inside of it at the moment. So, with that stated, fair enough. But if you did have something a little more server-like, you would find a lot more detailed information associated with it. Now, to take a moment and look at our administration feed, you'll also notice that we're able to create additional users that can utilize the system other than your original admin. Or we also have the NVT feed and the cert feed. So let's go to the NVT feed real quick. This particular tab allows you to synchronize the collection, or rather pull down additional network vulnerability tests, so that way you can continuously be up to date on the things out there that could harm your system. On top of that, the CVEs, or the common vulnerability and exposures, will also be updated from the cert feed. There's also a scat feed in here as well for additional tools and scanning types that you might want to get yourself involved in. At this point, I want to show you that there's also a client that OpenVAS utilizes. It's just called OpenVAS-client. And I'm a horrible speller at times. This is the default setup for it. You actually have to connect into it. Whatever your host name that you set up, and the port associated with the system, and of course, however you decide that you authenticate to the environment. Truth be told, though, I'm going to give you one warning. If you do set up an SSL connection so that way you can connect to it through a browser, this particular client has a lot of issues with the certificates. I have run into minor problems with that, and it actually just takes a little while for it to authenticate. Usually goes through, but it still takes some time. It does have all the exact same capabilities as the other one. I don't think it's so user friendly, as you can notice from credentials associated with the plugins, your rules, so on and so forth. It just doesn't look as crisp as Greenbow's security assistant does on the browser. Alright guys, well I hope you've enjoyed the small presentation for OpenVAS. I will also have a installation guide so I can show you how to install it on a Linux Unix system, and also one for Windows and the Google Plus for Phoenix TS. Alright guys, take care. Bye.
Here. Do I need to do a questionnaire to make sure that you guys actually learn these tools? No? Everybody's like, man, please stop talking. Oh God! Yes, I'm so sorry. Alright, so again, my name is Jonathan Jenkins. I do have business cards on both sides of the table here that you can grab before you walk out, and I will go find out about the drawings.